Decided to record.
Now turn 2 o'clock and we'll start off for you. Okay, it's now 2 o'clock. Time to call the Board of Directors special meeting workshop for Tuesday, June 6th, 2023. And we look like, oh yeah, we do have a, well, let's do the roll call next. Dory, give it a roll call.
Director Meyerhoffen,
Present.
Director Griffith,
Present.
Director Duff,
Present.
Vice President Sewell.
Here.
And President Martin.
Here.
Thank you. We have quorum.
And we'll go ahead with item 2, announcement and verification of remote meeting participation pursuant to AB 2449 or GC.
We don't need to address that, President Martin. Everybody, everybody's in person today.
Okay. All right, public input. This is the opportunity for members of the public to address the board on matters within the board's jurisdiction. Please limit comments to 30 minutes or less. State law prohibits the board from discussing or taking action on any item not listed on the agenda. Do we have any members of the public that wish to address the board?
President Martin, we do not.
Okay. Moving on to item 5. The fiscal year 2023-2024 budget. And who's going to take the lead on that?
I'll start out,
Okay.
and then we have a number of different things and some presentations to go on, but good afternoon, President Martin and members of the board. Today we will share with you a draft of the 23-24 budget. And my intro hopefully will give you sort of a visual characterization of what you will probably see and read from here today. And as with any budget, this is just a snapshot. It's just a moment in time. We're using what we know and what we know is true today to make projections of the things to come. I'm not going to be very long. I'm going to give you kind of a 50,000 foot level of what will happen today. To start with, you know, we have a lot of positive news. I won't get into the details, but our district is in good financial shape. We have almost no debt. I mean, there's always a little bit of debt here and there, and I'll get into that a little bit later on. We haven't raised the rates in 3 years. But the thing that I think some people don't realize is that throughout the years, we've built what we refer to as idle capacity, which is another thing that leaves us in pretty good shape. For example, we had a lot of development that was being proposed along Pearson Boulevard. So we built what I think is probably a trunk sewer, since it's not an intercept into the plant. I'm not exactly, Danny, do you remember how much that was? About $6 million?
I don't recall actually.
But that capacity is in place all the way along. We only have a few hundred homes on it right now, which is another issue, but in the long run, that has the capacity to get up to a few thousand homes. And we have that in other parts of the system as well. And then of course, you all know that we received a $68 million grant. So the district is in pretty solid foundation right now as we move forward. Just as I just mentioned, though, we have virtually no debt service on our rates. But the antithesis to this is, and you will see that most financial advisors will tell you that operating at zero debt is just not the best way to run a district or a business. Some level of debt helps you in many ways. It helps you invest in a timely fashion when it'll help you avoid higher costs, for example, at a later date. For example, in Michigan, there was about a $10,000 fix on an infrastructure just below ground, and they just kept putting it off and putting it off, and it finally collapsed. And the result was nearly, it was millions of dollars in damage. So those are the kind of things that we have to deal with. You can also make the money work for you. It also insulates you from the current customers carrying the burden of the future development, passing that cost on to those customers that will benefit from it at a later date. So debt is not a bad thing. And the next thing that I want to talk about is after this, we're going to dig even deeper by doing what we call a financial master plan. And Arturo will take you into that one. This is a lengthy process that will involve not only the board and staff, but we also bring the community into it so that we can see how they want to see their district move forward as well. We take a deep look into our finances and calculate what we think is the best move so we can move forward in a very cautious and knowledgeable fashion. But what should you expect today? Well, to start out with, we're going to continue to garner grants, just like always. There are more grants out there. I think the opportunity is even going to be better. We've done well in the last 2 decades. And I think over $110 million just in grants. And then with the assessment districts, like I said, that brings it up even more. And with the idle capacity, we're getting closer to $150–200 million in infrastructure that we didn't use rates to pay for. We will focus on preemptive investments, which you'll see this budget this year is basically last year we focused on it, but you're gonna see more of that happening in this year's budget, such as well rehabilitation, infrastructure improvements that we don't want to put off anymore. Then the other thing I want to talk about is basically economic forces. For example, when we bid the regional plant, we estimated the cost of that plant would come in around $27–30 million. The final bid was $47 million. So inflation is touching us and everyone a little harder than we expected. But this budget will see a 10% increase in our electric charges. Our sludge handling, as you all know, is going to go up about $150,000. We need to recognize also the early response that this community is doing. For example, you've seen a 10–20% reduction in our production. Now, most of that we think is because of the rain. In fact, I'm fairly sure that that's what most of it is all about. However, this community seems to respond in an anticipatory sort of way to the recession. That's all we're hearing on the news. It's a recession. So they might be tightening up a little bit. And I know when recession hits like it did in 2008, I saw production go from 12,000 feet down to 8,000 feet overnight. And this community is usually very hard hit. And well, we've been very frugal over the last 2 decades. And we've done things like we took advantage of an AQMD grant and put in about a $4 million solar plant, which is saving us about $200,000 a year or more. And then today you're going to see the draft budget, which has more than $87 million in capital improvements. This is not a little district. And it's an increase from 22–23. And some is due to the delay because we had non-critical construction we could hold off on. And then we have maintenance projects that we're looking closely forward to. One example, the staff looked closely at this project list to determine which is critical for the next year. These projects like well rehabilitation remain and always will remain the top priority. You'll see a lot of that in this budget. We also considered which projects make sense now, with the new regional plant coming online, and with the ability to send flow to the regional plant, that has a couple effects. And the regional plant will have a couple impacts on this budget. First of all, the opportunity for us to send flows to the regional plant will tell us to take one, can help us or allow us to take one of the trains off at the Horton plant, which we need to do as soon as we can get that flow off that train in order to make some improvements. But it also is increasing our operational cost because, but not as much as you may think. It's pretty slight. But we're gonna have to put people at that plant, and we're gonna have to see some costs associated with that plant from the operational standpoint. A lot of those have been decreased since, or will be offset by the decrease in, say, for instance, our legal bills, because we've settled all of our lawsuits. So we're starting to see the benefits of the advanced meter projects and the new portal and the new dashboard, and that's really making it less or more efficient for us in customer service. And that kind of gives you an idea of what you'll see today. So I'm gonna let Arturo take it from there and introduce our speakers and go from there. Okay, Arturo?
Thank you, General Manager Wallen, President Martin, and members of the board. Thank you for allowing us to present to you the draft 2024 budget. In addition to the budget numbers, there will be an update on the building and also an update on the long-range financial plan. We are planning on bringing the long-range financial plan contract for approval in this month's meeting. And so I wanted to bring Rep. Tellis or John with Rep. Tellis to give you a quick overview of what it is that they're going to be doing because it is in conjunction with our budget that we're going to be going forward because we don't have all the answers. And obviously having someone who can come and look at all of our numbers and make sure they're going on track with not only our water and sewer master plans, but also with cash flows. And that's what we're going to be looking at a professional to come and help us with those projects. So I'm going to go over a quick presentation on the budget. Please remember, it is a workshop. If you have any questions, let me know and we'll stop and go over anything that you want to go. I was not planning to go over anything other than what you asked me to go over. And obviously, I cannot try to imagine which sections we're going to be covering, but obviously we are ready for any information that you need additional. If we cannot provide it today, we'll definitely make sure you get everything that you need. So this is the presentation that I shared with you earlier, and I'm going to start sharing my screen. Sorry, I'm not sure what's going on. Couple of pages were blanked out. What we can do is go off of the layout that I provided, and then I can come back and figure out what's going on with the screen. The first page in the presentation was the process that we use to go through the budget. We began the budget review in March by looking at the information we needed and by going to all the other departments and making those requests between individual departments and also capital improvements to reimbursable jobs. Reimbursable jobs by nature do not require resources of the district. We get reimbursed 100% for those, but so they don't get budgeted, but that's part of the process that we go through. We have over 780 individual line items for all the managers and supervisors. You also met with the HR committee to go over the employee requests. Those requests were included in the current budget after it was approved by the board. And finally, included in the packet was a budget document. The budget document is what we are going to submit to CSDA for the Excellence Award in budget reporting. And again, it gives us a better review in terms of what we're presenting to our customers. It's a lot more detailed. It's not just numbers. We want customers to see what we're doing, what major projects we're focusing on in individual departments, and what it is that they're doing to make sure that we use their dollars wisely. And finally, the final adoption, which happens in June. What's in the current environment and information that was included in the report. We're talking about inflation, and we're also talking about recession. We started to see the numbers in terms of production going down. There's a trend, and as you can see in the budget numbers, we did not budget any major increases in revenue for that reason. Our consumption is going down, but we have new connections that make up for those. So we basically left a lot of the revenues the same as prior year. National and local burden, we're seeing a lot more loss coming down the pipeline about equity and access to water to those disadvantaged, especially that's going to affect us here in DHS, being a disadvantaged community. So we have to be ready for those as well to make sure that our customers and those that need it the most have the access that they need to water. In the past, we had delayed capital improvements through COVID. Last year, we began to get those back and started to do more in terms of the maintenance and pipeline replacement program. So we'll see that from last year's carry over to the current year in the capital improvements. Drought and conservation, that's another big message that we've been doing. And it's paying off. Customers are listening, but we're also being affected by the fact that they're using less water. And finally, the long-range financial plan, which is basically going to help us build a roadmap into where we go from here. How do we want to spend the district's money in terms of capital projects or anything else for that matter. So the assumptions that we used, we again had no revenue growth predicted. Our final increase in the current rate was January 1st, 2020. We had minor changes to current classification plan. The 4.2% COLA increase and bilingual pay that was passed at the HR committee recommendation. I put a graphic of the San Diego Union Tribune that talks about Southern California's rising cost of water. We attended at the Aqua, one of the sessions was about this particular issue and how the entire state is grappling with this issue right now. How are we going to make sure that we continue to provide water to our customers while navigating all of the costs associated, with getting those projects completed. Financial review, this is the information that I will be going over, the operating budget, the summary, budget summary comparison, and budget by function, and finally the capital, the project that we talked about, and the continuing appropriations review. So I printed the department budgets for you so that you can see them in a little bit better from what's going to show up on the screen or what else I could provide to you. And basically going over the operating revenues and expenses for the district, we have $21 million again budgeted for revenues and 23 million in 0.7 in expenses. If you look at those two numbers in terms of operations, that looks skewed. A lot of it has to do with the depreciation number, that even though it's not necessarily a cash transaction for accounting purposes, it is considered operating, and we have to include it in the operating expenses. If you look at the bottom on line 52, we added back in here to show that we're spending that allocation and increasing the cash by the mere fact that it was decreased in a previous line. Non-operating revenue, $922,000 in connection fees, $3 million in property taxes. Like Mr. Wallen mentioned, $250,000 in the solar credits. But the biggest item in here, as you know, is that grant. We have not collected anything on that grant. We are up to $30 million as of the end of in the middle of May. And we have actually a meeting this Thursday with the state to go over the requirements that they're going to need for us to submit that grant. So we'll be ready as soon as they give us a go ahead. And they've promised, which again, it's the state and nobody, you know, they cannot guarantee this, but they promise we can get our first reimbursement in August. And so we're very excited about that, but that's the majority of the items in here. The net income or loss to the district for 2024 will be projected $71 million. And that's increase in cash that we're bringing into the district. And so in addition to that, we are talking about loan proceeds. We are not going to go and actively get any more loans. What we are thinking about is shifting the loan that we have for the regional plan now that the grant is going to start to come in, to shift it to the building. And we'll go over that in a little more detail later on. Assessment districts, and finally the depreciation, leaving a cash flow to the district of $92 million. That $92 million is going to be going towards principal payments of debt. $730,000 is the amount that we have to pay in 2024. $86 million in capital improvements, $32,000 in vehicles, capital replacement reserve. This is the reserve of the board. Half of the depreciation we have to allocate towards reserve, and finally an increase in the reserve that has been under funded since we pretty much created that policy. Is there any questions on this page?
Yeah. So I went off based on here, okay. 26. Are these the exact same numbers in this chart that are on this worksheet?
Some of them should be. We are splitting them out for purposes of showing them compared to like our financial statements. I will go over those more later in detail, but they should be basically coming from the same.
Okay, because when I added this, the non-operating revenue up and then took out the interest, I came up with a different number.
Okay.
I came up with, well, the chart shows 71,282. I came up with 73,834. So that's a difference of 2,552,000 roughly. And so I'm kind of curious why my numbers are off.
Okay. I can go back and review that and give you an answer.
Okay.
Yeah, we can definitely look at
Did you
that.
say 2.5? Because maybe it's not taking into account the loss.
Isn't that the loss from up there? That's operating income. And so when I look at this,
Should be the net.
right, this is. So the operating income is included in this net income loss. Is that what we're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And that would be okay.
Yeah, because we want to show it as a district, we have not made the
Okay, it wasn't on this chart.
correct.
Okay,
So we don't make we don't have an actual policy as to how, because as you can see, operations wise, we're not meeting those operating revenues.
right.
And so we have to supplement those through property taxes, the connection.
No, I understand that, but it's on this chart
Right,
that's
correct.
missing. So if
Okay.
people are looking at this, they're gonna be like,
What
this doesn't
page is
match.
this?
This is, I have 2 pages. I have 31 is the block number, 24 is the top number.
Okay. Yeah, we can go ahead and.
I actually have something on that same page.
Sure.
Since we're there, might as well be the same page. So under interest expense.
Yes.
And I look back at the previous years. And that column, if I'm correct, should be the addition of the other 3 columns, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so when you look at interest expense. The sewer districts is 207,000, the water districts is 19, there's nothing for general, and it says 841 when it should say 226.
Correct. I think what happened is that report is not updated. I'm not sure what's happening, but we can go back and review that.
Yeah, because that repeats itself in several different pages throughout, and then when we're looking at the operating expenses change being 616, when that error in and of itself is 614.
Right.
I'm just trying to understand better where we are actually at as far as the budget change.
I can tell you that the paper in front of you is the most up to date and the information that we worked out of. I'll have to review why that information ended up in the
The
report.
sewer, the
different.
sewer one is incorrect.
Okay.
And you'll be able to reference where those other affected pages are from that?
Yeah.
That was what I had on the.
Okay.
page.
Yeah, the report in front of you is the most up to date, and I do apologize for those information that ended up in the actual report. The next page is the last year's budget updated. I'm not gonna go into detail on that one. I'm just wanted to show it for reference. The next one is the one that I will be reviewing, which is comparing.
I have a question on one you want to talk about.
Okay.
I don't remember your phone. Board of Directors.
Okay. I'm sorry.
I didn't. You there?
Yes.
I've been asking for a breakdown of, last year, the 400,000. And I haven't been able to get that. I'm starting to email on something else that I probably concerned that. I haven't got that information either. So we went up about approximately $200,000 for the Board of Directors budget. How do we arrive at an extra $200,000 from the 400?
I will go over that, and I will actually show you where that number comes from. Give me 1 second.
I have some questions and concerns about that same topic.
As do I.
This is not, when it says, board of directors, it does not necessarily mean everything that the board is, earning or getting paid to. Staff members, we do work, a lot of hours to provide you with details that you require and ask of us. And so we're supposed to budget for that as well. So we're allocating those hours and resources. So when it says salaries, that is not your salary. It is the employee's salary to meet your needs and requirements as well as their benefits.
That's what I was thinking is probably the case, that it includes staff time for. But the question becomes about what, maybe this isn't the appropriate place to bring it up. What is the mechanism for assuring that? Is it just up to the judgment of the employee as to whether or not that time that they're involved in is on behalf of the board of directors or the general manager or I mean, just their judgment call?
Yeah, we've got a training on that information to let the employees know what, and it's primarily the time that we have in there is management. Answering questions, replying to emails. We've had a lot of that this year compared to other years. And so we have to allocate our time accordingly.
One or two of the employees that I talked to didn't know the details of that, so maybe you want to review that again too.
And can I add to that? I appreciate the board being let know what the staff's criteria is, because, for example, if I am bringing to you a customer's issue that was brought to me that wasn't satisfactorily handled according to that customer by customer service.
Correct.
Is that now being charged against the board?
It
Because
is.
then that's not correct.
It
That
is.
should not be happening. in my
Well,
opinion.
when we don't answer the customer, we're not the ones corresponding with the customer, so we're corresponding with the board.
Correct.
So we're answering your
But
questions.
this is because of the inability by other departments in this business to be able to handle those,
Correct.
which then puts it on our plate to bring to you. That isn't something that should be charged against the board. It should be charged against the departments that weren't able to handle it in the first place.
Correct, and I was instructed to let you know that it is our normal process to get notified and for us to continue that process and keep you informed as we go back and forth with customers. For that reason, we could not verify whether you're asking for yourself or for an actual customer without having that interaction.
Well, I think every single customer issue I've brought to you their names, their addresses, all the details necessary, and usually writing of what their complaint and issues were. I don't feel that's something that this board is causing, I believe that it's a breakdown elsewhere that's
Right.
caused the board to become involved. Therefore, although the board needs to maintain following up on the solution, I still don't believe this should be on our fund.
Correct. When we get all of that information, we can easily allocate it to customer service, for example. But we have a lot that we cannot. And so that is why employees are allocating their time to avoid.
In more detail on that, it also included their benefits and fringe benefits. That's
Correct.
something they've already earned as their job here, whether they have to do work for the board. Those benefits are there anyway. I don't understand that being included either.
Well, our policy is to allocate everyone's time and benefits to each department, including capital and reimbursable jobs. When we're talking about employee salary, it includes those benefits. So we're not just going to put them in a general fund somewhere that we don't allocate, because we have to, by state regulation, allocate everyone's time and benefit pay, fringe benefits to where they're working. And it's all based on the hours that they work. So they're working more hours to a certain department, more benefit.
Then I think the board deserves to see the hours each employee has submitted against the board's fund.
Okay.
Now, I think we should be able to check and see how much they're claiming our work has cost them. So that we can not only check ourselves to make sure we're not overusing anyone in particular, but so that our input as to whether that was appropriate or not can be given.
I agree. I'm not sure that we can provide time cards, for example, but I can find out what information we can
I
provide.
will, but we could probably try to see what, we can't sort that out. I don't think it amounts, the customer thing, I don't think amounts to as much as you might think, but.
Well, those
If
are
it
the
does,
primary,
we can take it out.
that's
No,
the primary issues I've
So
brought.
that's the reason for this. For our budget going up like 54%. That's about,
And
what do you, just out of curiosity, what do you attribute that to? Is that
well,
something abnormal or normal or?
it is
just-
abnormal primarily because you are new member. We have new members in the board that we need to give information to.
Mhm.
So that's normal in terms of, but yeah, there's a lot of questions that we have to answer directly that we're not, then going back and actually conducting business as we normally would. And that's part of the main reason.
I mean, this is a tool too, just help, I mean, it's.
No,
still gotta
I'm
be
just,
paid for it.
when I went through. I'm looking at everything and I'm comparing last year to this year, and so I'm saying, okay, I see there's an increase 54%. So let me ask, what is that about? Because I know that there's newer people and so they're asking more questions, but overall, when I go through this stuff, I actually pay attention and look, and so I'm gonna have questions. Mostly for clarification, so that I can be informed when I'm talking about these things.
And one more comment. We were encouraged to reach out to staff ahead of time if we had any questions. But seeing that discourages me from reaching out to staff.
Okay.
I just want everyone to know that, because when I now have to worry about how much time I'm gonna take getting the answers I need to make a just decision, and I have to worry about how much they're charging against me, I'm just gonna do it here publicly, if that's gonna be the case.
Send it all to Arden and then it's all.
I do send it all to him. I send it to him and it goes everywhere, but I'm just saying that discourages our board from being able to do our job.
And mind you, this is not a bad thing. Having to allocate hours, that means that we're utilizing the resources one place versus another, and that's all it means. So we're
You're
not,
just switching it into sub-accounts
Right,
basically, same
right.
total, but it's divided this way and this way.
It helps us know, hey, wait a minute, this is going too far to this department, we need to start internally making some changes. It's a tool.
All right, let me finish what I was gonna say. I've been asking for this breakdown for 3 or 4 months, and I can't get an answer to it. So why are we talking about staff time for questions that I'm asking and I'm not getting any answers to? I think it was at $89,000 last year for staff time. 89, 60. Anyways, that comes out to 1 full-time employee for the board.
correct.
So Maybe we should just have our own employee who can come in and ask questions. I don't know. It seems like an awful lot of money that's being moved around and we don't know where it's going.
Correct.
Maybe you don't run your own business like that. And then there was some other issues in there with $70-some thousand for training. Board. So this is why I've been asking this question for 4 or 5 months, and here we are today. I'm still not getting it, and I sent you an email on the other question, and I still haven't got information on that yet.
What
But
information
the training, wouldn't include any staff training.
Well,
That would-
I've
that
been for 7
would-
months, I haven't been trained for anything, and I can give you a hard
Well, it
time.
includes conferences and like the CSBA
webinar.
Leadership Academy, the webinars and stuff like that, so.
That's all education and training.
Yeah, we're not, I think you bring up a good point. But we still, like I said, this isn't, when somebody comes in and asks us, what y'all make? I'm the first one to tell them that you don't make enough. And the second one is that those numbers aren't what you cost us, it's what, you know, what.
I would say the
what we
way it
distribute the
appears
cost.
in the document is misleading to the, not to somebody with a background in finance or something like that, but to the general public, look at that and say, oh my God, look at the money that the board of directors, when we wind up getting $100 a meeting, it's paid for in the Coachella Valley and maybe Southern California, I don't know. But,
We're the only ones that can change that, nobody wants to.
And it does say
I
directors.
didn't get this job to make the money, I didn't.
Yeah, you know, come on.
It does say director's fees, which are the difference, yeah.
Right.
And again, budget purposes, we have to allocate 1/12 of every month because for the max that you can earn, because conservatively, we have to assume that you can't come to every single meeting for that month.
Then we got another one for you, public affairs. Where's all that money going?
Again, this is the department, entirely the department that covers all the grants that they're managing, the turf rebates, all of the presentations, the school events, everything that's PR related, reviewing Ardent's information before it goes out to the public, reviewing the class action settlement information, new bill inserts, anything that goes out to the public as well, including again their salaries and materials and expenses to keep those programs going. And I can provide you more detail if you prefer, so that you can see exactly what.
More information if we have an emergency where we have.
So Marion's, compensation would be included in that?
Correct. And so is Carol.
In the bill board?
And if you look at page
Yeah.
36 and 43, it does give you the list of everything in there, so like breakdown.
First one is the salary.
Right, which brought me to a question. We had one increase, and it wasn't a lot on the public affairs, but for outside services. And I thought with bringing on additional workers, our goal was to reduce outside services. So I'm just wondering why our budget is doing the opposite of what our goal is.
Yeah, and I can look into that. The one thing I can say is we haven't added any staff to that department. It has been primarily the increase in the projects that we have been doing, the outreach. We had an event here last week and another one coming up in 2 days for the Live Up event. So we are doing a lot more outreach. And as you remember, we also were nominated and won that outreach certificate for that reason, because we want to stay out in the public to make sure that we're connected to the community.
At the same point, in the same respect, I still would love to see maybe another FTE that can bring that number down, so that instead of subcontracting so much work out, we're holding it within our community, offering an additional job in our community. That's just how I see it, and I just wanted to make the comment.
We are
A lot
having-
of times though, subcontractors is cheaper than buying them full time.
Yeah.
In some respects, yeah, but in the big picture of things, we are one of the few in this area and in this community that offers a good place for people to work.
So we have to pay prevailing wages either way? The contract and. Prevailing wages?
Well, it just depends on the third thing. I don't even know exactly what example I would use, but I can tell you that we can't afford to keep people of certain specialties on board all the time, and we only use their services for a short period of time. So much of the contract services that we get are cheaper than we could get significantly. Yes.
A few more questions on page 27, which is the operating fund review revenue by fund. What are central services?
Central services, that's part of the administration team. The record information, filing, paper, you name it, it's basically the
Supplies
right.
and all of those things go in there, no MT.
Employees close their time to it because they are doing things related to the department, for filing, storage. We do have to, as you know, public records request, and we also, by the state, we have a retention policy that we have to meet, and that's when the tender spending as well, including, shredding all of that paperwork.
And then, I just wanted clarification on two line items. You had collection, which went up 207,000, and disposal that went up 552,000. Which of those pulls the sludge removal? Thank you. And so the new contract, after losing our longtime contractor, was $500,000 increase. In the future, is there a way that when we get agenda items brought to us, it can have the fiscal impact?
Correct.
Very clearly put somewhere where we can easily see how much what the staff is asking us to do costs. Thank you. And then the only other question I had on that page was the engineering department. It went down by 768,000. What did we get rid of?
The master plans are about to get completed. That was the majority of those items. They are now in the final stages, the water and sewer master plan, in a few other studies and updates. The salt and nutrient management is now completed as well, so they fell off and we don't have to.
And we don't anticipate needing more.
No.
Okay.
Not this year.
Yeah, but we don't know exactly what we do.
And I lied, I did have one more. Why is pumping up $1 million?
That is where General Manager Wallen was explaining those needs for the well. There is a lot of detail in there from, and I think Danny could better explain that in terms of the operations. Do you mind?
I just wanted to know.
Pumping?
Pumping.
It went up $1 million.
That's the entire, that's the entire production budget.
From this location, you guys pick me up on the microphone. Otherwise, I'll be puzzled.
You check with Dory.
So for various items that already been talked about earlier, we're continuing our well rehabilitation program, the prioritization of that program. We're also incorporating automation on some of the critical components in our system, for example, our pressure release station. We're also improving the way that we analyze our chlorine. We're putting chlorine analyzers in the system, getting more modern, consistent with the industry standards are. Also, there has been almost a double twice the price in chlorine. We use the word chlorine, but it's sodium hypochlorite, which is liquid. There's been almost a double cost increase on that. Some of the improvements to our chlorine buildings in order to put larger chlorine containers so that we can go to them frequently. We can take part in a service that delivers it rather than have to getting it. There's also enough to reduce costs. So we have to spend some of those costs today to go ahead and be able to have long-term volume reduction. So those are including items. I mentioned there's a lot of rehab. So that's general, that's total. So the process here is when we say, well, I'm not sure what we're referring to exactly, but we've done. Again, that figure doesn't make sense as it has a special item, but as a total, yes, we're looking at several levels. We're looking at rehabilitation, and this is an effort that started about a year and a half ago. So we're looking at operating costs, you're referring to capital costs. So, there's a difference, I can get into that once we get to that item. But as far as this item goes right now, about a year and a half ago, we have been working towards an effort to get into proactive mode, getting to a preventative maintenance much more sooner, much more routine, consistent with what the industry requires. So prior to that, reactive, because of a number of things.
Yeah, we're trying to be proactive, for example, you have, you're talking, you could spend close to $1 million in rehabbing the downhole system and equipment. But if we wait too long to do that, then we freeze up, we might destroy some of the casing, we've increased our costs by hundreds of thousands.
You know, and what General Manager Wall is saying is preventative maintenance hopefully gets to it more routinely, we catch smaller items rather than a large catastrophic failure that we've experienced in the last 5 years.
And we're taking a look at all the wells, getting a plan in place where we can get.
I forgot one thing. Thank you. The human resources fund, what does that include? Just one employee and a 1/3 time?
It also includes some of the other employees' times that is related to HR related items. But there is a lot more employee events, and we did have to change our where we send employees to do a physical and also the workers' comp, and it's very increasing their cost. In addition to 1 or 2 events that being added to the budget.
Yeah, I was like, 1 and 1/3 FTE, and it went up 51,000. We needed to have.
Well, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, and the other thing is HR. We may go a year and not have any HR issues, and all of a sudden we have HR issues.
So not to drag this out further, but I'm gonna back up on, I went by this stuff, not this.
Right.
In terms of FTEs, we talked about the need for more workers once the regional plant gets open, but I don't see any budgeted extra FTEs added this year.
They were already added last year.
Okay.
In anticipation of getting them trained and ready for the.
And we're really only.
Okay, because according to this, we added 1 last year.
Correct.
Mhm.
Okay, and then I noticed there was an safety officer that was eliminated. What's the compliance officer? What happened?
I'm not sure.
We created that position, assuming that that would have a specific need. That person left, and we were able to basically, we brought all the programs together with one person so they could organize it. That person left, so then we split it back up.
Into the
and then-
department.
And then used it.
Okay.
For other employees.
But do we have one person generally in charge of the overview of compliance and safety?
Depending on what aspect, if it is related to field activities, there's one person, and then if you're relating to OSHA and being here in an office setting, we have someone there too. So, yes.
Brian, OSHA requirement, CPR certified.
Yes, we went through that. Yeah.
And all that.
Yeah, actually, everyone in the agency has
Everybody
has
out there
CPR
doing
classing and
that?
everything,
All that?
both office and field.
Just for the record.
So the next page that I was gonna cover, we basically, we're gonna cover the expenses compared to, 1 year to the next. And I think we went over a lot of those already, so if you have specific questions on any other item, I can answer them or, give you the information you need. The one that stands out primarily was the administration that did go down $1.2 million, primarily through legal. And a lot of the time that is usually spent in administration, again, got split into the other departments accordingly.
One observation. And I went back and looked at the 22, 23, which allowed me to see the numbers from 21, 22. And then looking at I'm on page 30/37, where it's summary of expenditures by year. And the only thing I'm a little concerned about is that there's a lot that we went over budget on in the last 22-23 budget. Yet we're not correcting that in the 24, potentially putting us in a position of going over budget again. On a lot of these items, and I don't want to go line by line, that'll drive everyone crazy, but I just, in general, am concerned that if we repeatedly go over budget, then our budget isn't addressing enough. And so I'd ask for maybe a secondary look at this to see if maybe some of these numbers need to be better adjusted to address what went over.
And we did go back and forth between all of the departments, asking them for detailed explanations as to why they wanted to keep those budgets where they were. And obviously, we did reduce a lot of them, and that's what we ended up with and what we're presenting. And my answer to that is actually, that is why we're gonna have John do the review of our finances to guide us as to where we go from here. Do we need to continue to delay repairs and maintenance on wells, on pipes, or do we cut employees? Do we cut supplies? Those decisions need to be made by the board. And so that would be the next step to have those discussions.
I kind of disagree slightly. The board needs to have a strategic plan meeting first. It's very hard for us to sit here and agree on a budget when we don't have an accurate, active, open, agreed upon strategic plan as a board.
Great.
We have a list of facilitators to help us move into that. We're going over those to get some pricing. I think that would be part of the next thing, at least, especially the strategic plan would be important to integrate with the financial master.
Because you're saying we're gonna determine what's gonna have priority by the help of this gentleman's company, which is fantastic. However, the board hasn't decided what our priorities are yet. So it may be contradictory and it may require them to have to go back and do it again. So maybe we need to prioritize strategic planning before they get started.
And getting ahead, in his presentation, one of the things he does review why he's here today is because the board is heavily involved with those decision-making going forward and updated accordingly. So I think that is part of the
We're being given, the board's being given, what, 10 days? We're gonna approve this on a Monday here. On that. What's the date? When's in our next meeting, 10th or something? Anyway, we got about 10 days here before we're gonna approve this. It took you folks longer than 10 days to put this together.
Right.
So how are we supposed to have a complete understanding without having, like Director Duff was talking about? So,
And in the future, another side note to make, whoever is on your financial committee, it being myself this year, should have been included much earlier on in the communication so that I could have communicated with my board and we could have brought any concerns or questions we had earlier on instead of now.
Right, and for your information, we, through Thursday and Friday, we were still working on these numbers because they were changing on the daily. A lot of the reasons why we wait until the end of March, April, because we have more accurate data for a longer period of time. If we started that sooner, we're gonna have to estimate a lot more than what we're currently doing.
And what's the deadline to finalize the budget?
June 30th.
See, that makes it very, very, very difficult for us. So I think we have to readdress the scheduled plan of this whole process, because in order for us to do our due diligence like the staff has done, we need more opportunities to communicate about. Okay, I had to put that in there, sorry.
But Cheryl, I understand it. It's just a matter of statistics and it's changing all the time, but you said some of this is changing daily. Can you give me an example of what's changing daily?
Well, we did not have one of the things you're gonna see next week in the package is the contract for
Landscaping,
the landscaping.
we have uniforms, all of those are out to bid.
They did not, they're still in the bidding process. I was waiting the longer possible to get an actual bid versus just putting a number in there. I added last year's number plus 15% contingency because that's all I have to go by in terms of estimating that cost.
And these days, that can be substantial. We're
So-
getting some very Yes, fluctuations compared to what.
So you have a general idea, so that money is in the budget to cover these there, correct?
Correct. But it is not as accurate as it could be because we don't have that information back.
I mean, it's like I said, this is a planning process, because we be precise if we would like it to be. We use the information that we have to predict what we think we'll need. And we do
Landscaping
move,
was last, sorry, right? Whatever the landscaping was last year is what you're using to, and add a few, little bit more to it because of costs could come
Yeah.
down. That type of thing.
little bit of that, and a little bit of what we expect to happen.
In terms of the next page, the functional expenses, the budget, we can see primarily that there, again, with revenue, there was not a lot of changes. Other than on sewer, we did overestimate sewer last year. That was an error on our part. So that's one of the ones that had the biggest changes. However, property taxes did have a pickup in the current year as well, including investment income. And again, the grants are the biggest number in here with a $95.8 million versus $67.4 million increase. And on the expenses, again, now we're breaking it down by, instead of department, salaries, benefits, fringe benefits, and materials. And most of the increases in these items are due primarily to the inflation costs that basically all of us saw an increase in our expenses this last year that has not laid out in terms of where we're heading in 2024. Those numbers are still pretty high. One good note to see in French benefits, so you can see French benefits actually went down. The main reason for that is now the employees' PEPRA numbers are higher than the classic number in terms of the PERS retirement, which means the district's paying less for that retirement benefits for employees. Any particular questions on this page? Okay.
On the sewer. That's how much we're charging her, or
Those are the fees for sewer, correct? The 7.3 million?
okay. So under Proposition 218, I believe it is. We're supposed to do a study for the adequate cost.
Mhm.
And then if we're gonna have an increase over the 5 years, it's supposed to come.
Well, you can do, you don't have to be 5, you can do anything 1 to 5, I don't know what it is. Yes, but that's what will happen when we do this.
That's part of the financial master plan for
To do the study.
Okay. Thank you.
One quick question on the budget expenses. Why are our construction costs not on there? Our anticipated construction costs. We have the budget of the grant revenue, but not the expense.
That is included in the capital improvements, those are part of capital, and we have to capitalize them for accounting purposes all the way to the bottom. You're looking at the comparisons.
Yeah.
The previous pages give you a better information on that, and that's all the way in the bottom. There's this capital improvement. That's where they're tracked in terms of budget.
Okay.
Yeah, we are required to set those aside until the project is complete. Then we close it out, begin depreciation, and it converts into an asset.
I hate to say it, but I wish we could leave the uncollected grant money out to them.
Yeah. And
Sorry, I'm just
with
putting that out there.
and for budget purposes, as you know, we have to be conservative with what we know and the information we have to put that in there.
Thank you.
The last two items in terms of the operations is the proposed classification plan, which gives you the detail of where the employees are for the district between executive, administration, finance, operations, and so forth. Again, minor changes here for a couple of employee changes. And finally, the salary matrix that does include the 4.2% COLA as approved by the board.
How do we know what step the FTEs we have are on?
It's based, so that was based on the class and comp study that we had last year. We did have a company come out and do a review of all of our positions compared to the major water districts around the area. They gave us guidance on where we ended up with those positions.
But how do we know from the FTEs we have listed here, which step they fall in?
Oh, we have in our accounting system.
So we can't know, but you know.
Correct. I'm not sure if we can provide that information. I don't think it's public record, so.
Well, public record, but they don't tell you what step the person's on, because it's reported the same way. So it's just hard for me to tell, like.
We
how
budget at the top step.
Yes.
The step F.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
budget for the very
Yeah,
top
yeah.
tier. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, as we do in most of our items, we overestimate expenses and underestimate revenue. And this is one of those key components.
Thank you.
Moving on to capital projects and changes. The capital improvements in the current year saw a net increase of $105,000 and primarily with additions of $4.4 million and capital projects that are being completed at June 30th of $4.3 million. The highlights of the capital project listing highlight on the next page. The next, as you know, we have the regional plant, which has $68 million, including area M2 and the conveyance line. Our next biggest project is the administration building. And that is still budgeted at $33,300,000. The major projects anything over $1 million accounts for 121, of which the district has accumulated roughly $37 million already, leaving the remainder that was included in that $87 million we saw earlier allocated towards the capital improvement. So the next two pages are the continuing appropriations for capital, showing you all of the current jobs that are capital improvement jobs that we have. We have several that are closing, again, for $4.3 million. And we're adding funds to a couple of other projects to complete them, including the new ones that are at the bottom of the report. John Deere compact utility tractor, Muffin Monster, inline grinder, new watch, bulk machine, new meters, and a ERP system that we desperately need to be able to make the improvements that are going to help with the information that we present to the board as well.
That's a question.
Sure.
So Riverside County Mountain View Servicing Project, which is line 67. I see we have that in here, but that was completed.
Correct. I'm not sure what the status is of this. The main reason why we leave a lot of jobs is because there's some administrative part that has not been completed, and it still needs to get done. So.
Okay. And just so I can be clear, so we talk about continuing appropriations, but that doesn't mean that's actually money that's sitting there waiting.
No.
That's just what has been budgeted in the past.
Correct. So it's an accumulation of the capital projects. If you look at the bottom of the second page, we are estimating $87 million in capital expenditures in the current 2024 fiscal year. Of that, $69 million is going to be covered by grants. The other $16 million reallocation of that debt from the regional plan to the new building. Actual cash out the door for the district is estimated at $1,100,000. So.
Nobody else has a question.
No, go ahead, Ted.
Mine will come to you. Brian, my question is back to you. The belt machine isn't about ready to time to replace. I think you bought a new in 2009.
The belt press.
Yeah. Yeah, 2009 is when you got it.
I don't know, Dan, what the belt press.
2009?
Yeah.
Roughly in the mid 2000s, but it has a life cycle of probably 25 plus to 50 years.
Okay, so we haven't
I
replaced
don't
the
think-
maintenance, is
Yeah,
what we're talking
we
about.
replaced rollers, we
Yeah.
replaced the belt itself.
Being in it,
Mechanical part.
yeah.
Yeah, no, I think we're fine.
Did you think of yours?
Yeah,
Please go.
okay, so. Obviously, this is easier to read than this, okay? There's projects in here, and they'll say a combination of MSWD funds and state funds and all that. And it's not delineated, and I think that really helps is if we know, here's a $10 million project and we're expecting 4 million in grant and this much from the state, if that's broken down. But I have a question, and this is the third rail, and so I'm just gonna go ahead and touch it, okay? And that is the admin building. So in 2023, it was proposed at there was budgeted for 16 million last year, okay? And so I see this coming over 31. I mean, realistically, at the rate we're going, I don't know that we're really going to spend $31 million in the next year. Wouldn't it be more prudent from my perspective, and kind of goes with the strategic plan and what our goals are, but you know, we have the Vista Reservoir rehabilitation, the terrace reservoirs, which keep getting pushed off and pushed off. And if you cut that in back to what the 2023 amount was, 16, that frees up 15 million, all right? And that would actually cover those repairs to get done this year. And then you have got your infrastructure, the major infrastructure concerns, or some of them, taken care of. And so when I look at this, personally, I think it's foolish to allocate $31 million to something that we're not really going to spend 31 million on in the next year, but we can certainly allocate that money to necessary infrastructure improvements. And I know, Ted, you said last time when I said the big one could be the next day, you laughed at me, but the big one could be tomorrow, and we should be focusing, from my perspective, on the things that are actually going to protect our supplies rather than this. And also I don't know where it is in here, but I also saw that in here, we were still budgeting for drywall repairs and stuff that we said we weren't going to do in here. Administration office repairs, 65. So I don't know why we're still budgeting 182,000 for that if we're not going to do that. We're going to do, yeah, line 65. Okay. Drywall and painting was 135. What is it now?
I'm sorry,
99,661.
that needs to be changed. That was changed into the north building improvements.
Okay.
That were now completed, so we need to.
Yeah.
change the
Okay.
description.
Yeah.
So that
I can.
that's the kind of stuff that we really need to kind of look at this is. So if you take that out, automatically now your numbers change. And then I do think, I think if you're going to take a look at a future admin building, we all know we need one. I just don't think putting 31 million in this year's budget is prudent. That's my perspective.
And the only major project update that I do have is gonna be the new building.
Right.
Through, to give you an update on where it is and where it stands.
But I would appreciate if you would take my feedback under consideration.
Just so everybody understands. I mean, earthquake issue, sure, we may have, I lived here all my life, I've been waiting for it since the 7th grade. But the point is that when we may have an earthquake tomorrow, the rush to spend $500,000 on generators. That's where I have the problem with the excuse of an earthquake.
I'm not talking generators. I'm talking about.
It may fall in on our head here in this building. You know, or we could, what about the 100-year flood that we're 200 years overdue on? So when we use these emergency type of things, that was my issue.
Okay, I'm just joking.
I do want to concur with what Director Griffith said, and I think that goes back to what I said earlier, is that without this board being able to sit down, be given a workshop where we are told, okay, here's all the projects we completed from the 2017 strategic plan. Here's the ones with their status. Here's where we're at and how much more money we need in order to be able to finish these. And here's the new one. But we haven't had that privilege, unfortunately. And so it really makes it difficult. And I feel that, like Director Griffith was saying, we need to be protecting our community, number one, protecting our water source, number 1.5, right? So those kind of things are more important than where any of us do our business, unfortunately. I do agree it's necessary. There are a lot of reasons why this building is not acceptable much longer, right? But at the same time, I think that the board needs an opportunity to prioritize all of these capital improvements better to complete this. And then going back to the, like you had caught something, the emergency backup generators for well 27, 31, 32, and 37, didn't we just purchase those?
No, those are portable generators. These are permanent generators.
So they're on there twice though. At least they were on in the book here. No,
They were approved for purchase. We have not received.
so they'll still be here
Correct.
until you send the money out.
Correct.
Okay. And see, I guess that's kind of going along with what he asked for as far as more information. If we could have shown board approved this, contract signed, ordered, delivery date, estimate, whatever, we can't tell where we're at with the information as it's currently given.
And I guess that's why, so you have an operating budget where everything turns into a pumpkin on June 30th. The capital continues because of the reasons you just mentioned. So that's the distinguishing characteristic between the operating budget and the capital. So the capital, we can keep projects on there for decades because it's something that we've identified in the master plan. And then as Director Griffith was talking about, then the budget cycle makes sure we have enough available cash or we go out and get the revenue. So seeing a project on the capital for multiple years and having it pushed out, that's exactly why it's there. It gives us the flexibility to do so.
And that's what we do. We both will not invest in some of that capital and we think we need operation revenue.
And I think what we try to do in the summary sheets in the budget document, we talk about what we've spent and what we're pushing forward to next year. Unfortunately, this budget that we have in front of you today is a little bit difficult because we held on to so many projects without having the FBA for the regional plan. We held back almost all of our capital projects to make sure that we had the cash flow that we needed. So you're spot on a lot of things you're saying. We hear you loud and clear. We have to get more information, better information, and if the state would have given us money, we probably would have moved on some of these.
Well, and I think,
But we understand.
I think that we'd like to be able to help you in prioritizing that and making
Absolutely.
sure that those things we've neglected, so to speak, or have had to put on the back burner that shouldn't maybe have been. Because I would hate for our new plant to come online and then we have infrastructure that's in place fail because we didn't do something and now the new pressures and the new usage and all the changes now affect some of our older infrastructure. So I just want to make sure that we really focus on that.
Being Marine, always prepared, so when it comes to emergencies, we should be prepared.
And there are some things we do in operations that we don't share. And it's not because we want to hide things or something like that. For example, the Vista Reservoir, we've talked about that for at least 5 years. Well, we actually dove that tank and did another inspection to make sure that it would last another couple of years versus the immediate that we saw a couple of years ago. So we do continue to follow up and check to make sure that we're not making a poor decision on deferring some of the maintenance or some of those projects. But you're right, that was never brought to the board because it was just somebody that went in the tank for a week and they gave us a report and said, you know what, it's not, it hasn't deteriorated any worse than it was 2 years ago.
I guess I kind of would just like to see like in order of priority, the capital improvements so that we could kind of keep that focus.
So the master plan is supposed to do exactly that.
that's what I say.
So yes, so the master, when we start, so right now we're recalibrating the model to make sure from both the water and the sewer. Once we do that, then we put in various scenarios, whether it's infill or it's future development. And based on those criteria, then there'll be improvements to the system that will be required. When we start developing those projects, we will be bringing those to you. I would almost liken it to some of the other things that we've done that were more larger documents that we brought to the board, maybe 4 or 5 chapters at a time. The master plan will do exactly that because what you're asking for is actually part of the master plan process, and you will have the ability to prioritize, or at least hear why staff prioritize certain things over others. So we are getting there. We're just not there yet. And you're right, it makes it difficult to make decisions on this budget. But the nice thing about the capital budget is that those projects, once they're on the list, we know they're important. The prioritization can happen after, but at least gives someone like John an opportunity to, how much money you're gonna need in the next 5 to 10 years, so we can start budgeting appropriately.
So we can accomplish what needs to be
The
done.
place and time, as already said, and things do change, and we try to be as flexible as we can, but you're absolutely right. The prioritization is necessary. It's necessary for not only the board, but also the staff as well. And that's where the master plan process will help shed some light on some of these priorities.
Brian, when you said you go over that tank, you know, the terminal will last another couple of years, providing there's not a major what?
Earthquake.
So, and if there is, what will we do then? What will the people who live in that area do?
Oh, have beachfront property.
So,
You just buy them all robots, right?
I know there's some seriousness to your question. And if we were to lose a reservoir, we have portable generators we've talked about. We have a transfer pump that's currently being purchased. We have other
I understand
opportunities.
all that part of it. Now, we've all been through all that
Okay,
part of it.
okay.
What about the residents that live below that? Next to it?
They'll get wet.
Well,
That's not our.
We just, that's not.
I don't think
the
any,
people we serve, is it?
well, but I don't think any of us can sit here and say that we have every single area in the city. And the reason I say that is because we had two major spills. And when we had, the three roots breaking the line. The first one came down through and flooded a number of different places. It wasn't because of what we did, was because the zoning allowed several of these people to build lower than the drainage area allowed. It wasn't the district's fault, it was the way the storm drainage was approved in the building process. That might still be relevant, I don't know.
And to answer your more on a precise note, especially you, Ted, all of our reservoirs were built by the building code that was enforced.
At that time.
After the Northridge earthquake, they then changed the building code because they found more information, and the frequency of that earthquake was different than anything they had experienced or was able to document. So they changed the building code. So I want to make sure we didn't build an unsafe reservoir.
No, I understand that.
So I just want to make
The things wear out, and I know we didn't do anything wrong.
Where we see
50
that,
years hasn't done anything.
where
Something's happening, we need to be prepared for it.
Yeah,
That's gonna be what, $7 million when it happens.
where we see that in many of the areas is, for instance, fire flow. I mean, when we first started in this, fire flow was 500 gallons a minute for an hour and a half. Now it's 1,500 gallons a minute for 2 hours. You know, well, the system was designed according to what the standards at that time.
Fire department said you have to have them in residential, and
I'm just telling you that
we don't have
Okay,
enough
sorry.
for up there.
no one can answer that.
It just just to add to what Brian was saying, the rehabilitation of Vista wasn't necessarily cited, but then I just want to qualify my we drove. We can't dive in and understand it sounds such a by any type of magnitude of site activity. It was dove and determined that we had interior lining issues that had, in this industry, we look like good cheese or they're going to get by. So in this case, at that time, they gave us a dive report and said, hey, you need to do rehab. So what Brian had asked that we do when we have these other reservoirs is required by the state water resources control board. We also redove that reservoir. When we did so, they won't tell you that it's going to last X years. They'll tell you that you don't need a maintenance in the next 2 to 3 years. So that was more comforting for us to make a decision to prioritize our work. So
And when you drove that was a few years back, wasn't it?
originally, or just or what Mr. Macy's speaking.
we did that.
We did 2019. We did it in 2023.
Yeah, we just did it this year.
We did it in 2023.
February, actually.
So we based the project off the 2019 data. So we redove the reservoir in 23 to understand, hey, do we do this project or do we do this project? Can we go ahead? We're putting a lot of capital out or a lot of cash flow out for this regional facility. So that's why we had that, as Mr. Mason mentioned, we had to, and I believe it was Mr. Wall as well, we had to defer some funds. Now we're trying to.
I think the main thing is I don't want to see it come back to haunt us because we aren't prepared, and I don't want to see anybody getting wet.
Certainly, that's the worst call we get.
They're not even thought that.
I just want to provide it with clarification.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do have one more question or request. I counted 14 new capital improvement projects. When I compared to what was listed in 2022-2023 budget. But in looking back at the last 4 general managers reports, I'm not seeing anything. Can we please get something to the board that tells us what all of these are? You know, it's concerning as a board member to see one talking about a particular well in Chromium 6. I'd like more information on that. So if in this process, we could get some more information about the new capital improvement projects added, I really would appreciate that.
A lot of those were not necessarily added. They just did not have any expenses in the prior year. Or in
So these
2023,
were on the list.
they were on the list, but because they had 0 expected expenditures. Oh, sorry, not the report that you have. Yes, you're correct. For that reason, because we only wanted to show what was gonna be spent the following year. So
there was an issue on the well 29 with Chromium back in 2022-2023, but it wasn't on the list.
no, that's when we first started to review some of that information.
Okay.
To start going into those wells and reviewing what information we have to get. Because we were still working with the state and the guidelines were changing, we decided to hold off.
Well, right, the compliance study
Right.
was on both,
Right.
but there's a new one that says well 29 Chromium 6 treatment design.
Okay.
And I just would like to know why.
I think that's the leftover.
It is a left.
Yeah,
But
that
it
was,
wasn't on the 2022-2023 budget.
it should, so what happened, so in 2000, that line item has been in the budget, I believe, probably 2015-16. And the reason being is because that's when the maximum contaminant level was at 10, when the state established it, and then the lawsuit then basically forced the state to remove that MCL and go back and do the analysis again for cost estimating. So what simply happened is that project got delayed. So that particular item has been delayed since the MCL was removed. So what we did is we kept it on there because we knew at some point, depending on what it came back at, if it comes back at 10, that well still has Chromium 6 over 10. So because now the state has now decided that 10 is still going to be the number, we're going to start actually evaluating our wells again. And we're going to be using that particular line item because it lines up closely with the initiatives that project was first established under. So you're right. It was always on the line item since 16. It just wasn't funded last year, and it's going to be funded this year as we start ramping up again.
As well as the study.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I know that was a long discussion on the
I
project.
have to stand up and see what Director Duff was looking at there, because I noticed where there was some well testing, or after water testing, I should say, not you refer to one well. There was water testing, and it was like we're paying extra for Chromium 6 testing.
Probably.
So what's that all about? I understand. The Chromium 6 is throughout California.
We only have to do.
I've done an in-depth study on Chromium 6. Where it comes
We
from.
only test for what we're required to do, and then some other testing just for our own information. But to do a study on a constituent that we normally don't test to, we have to add those tests to our palette.
So the Chromium 6 test was something that is required by the state to add to the regular testing?
No, we're doing that for our compliance test. So if you think about, so Chrome 6 wasn't a maximum contaminant level, so we only have to do it on a tri-annual every 3 years. So we do it every 3 years. However, when Chrome 6 became an MCL, then it was required to do on a quarterly basis, because now it's something that's regulated. And then it went away, so our testing went down, and now we're going to be now doing a compliance study, so now we're going to start testing for it again on a more regular basis. So technically, correct me if I'm wrong, Danny, it's still every 3 years is when we have total Chrome. Not even Chrome 6.
Repealed NCL for Chrome 6. So what Mr. Mason's saying is accurate. However, our triangle is due on a Title 22 report, which is due this year, is you have Hex Chrome or you have Chrome 6 that we get your revenue that was recently done. So recently Hex Chrome. So we did that not as requiring that Mr. Mason said, but also to get a benchmark. So as it was back in 2015 and 2017 when we were required to do some up to we stopped the quarterly. We don't get this. Now that we're talking about It's looking like 10 might be what they're gonna come out with state. We need to start getting some data sets. So we're ready for this. The Chrome 6 study that's gonna look at how we're in the direction of environment.
And hopefully there's new technology out there.
And just for, just understand, like 29 is the only one listed here. 29 was, is still, well, I don't know, highest. They have to be 10.5, 10.5. Round up 11, and 11 is more than 10. Right. It could be 10.1, 10.2, 10.4. It's still not exceeding the NCO if it were 10 today.
It's not something we're gonna get away from.
Yeah, it was, as the committee said, it's to give us an understanding of where we are today. We haven't done it, we have been required to. Things are starting to come down like it's looking like it's going to be something. When we get a new state works, we'll probably get another. You never know, anytime you need to comply by.
But there are different regulations for it, and
True, and that's a great comment, because generally when you look at operating costs, those are number one reasons why operating costs go up is to deal with
And we don't have.
changing regulations.
And also, when these projects are in this list, it does not mean we have a free rein to go in and spend all this money on all these projects. These are the ones we do keep coming back to the board for approval in terms of the contracts, and additional costs associated with any of these capital improvements, before we move forward with any. work.
Is the budget the appropriate time for us to address maybe some concerns regarding some of the approval policies that we have as far as financial limits and what comes to the board and what doesn't, and aggregate amounts per contractor and things like that?
We can do that at any time.
And actually, that will probably be the first step in the long range financial. Because they usually look at policies first. And that way they have a good idea of how we operate and what policies we need. Procurement policy, usually the first one they look at. And that I think answers your question from that perspective. So we're gonna be looking at all of our policies as we start the long range financial.
I mean, we're not trying to, I mean, basically, we need to know when people come in, it's like, if we just are real loose with this capital improvements program, people need to know, we got 80 some $1 million in projects that we need to move on. And
And
yet,
that's the
we
thing.
don't have to move on them all, and they do come and go. But it's just information.
But information that we as a board and then the staff need to act on, and given what we all went through with COVID-19 and the stall that had to be put in place on a lot of things, we have a lot of making up to do, and that's gonna cost the district a lot of money. So we have to prioritize this correctly and be like a chess game in order to get this accomplished. As far as I can see.
Well, we can do it.
While it is complex, I don't know if it's complicated as chess. Maybe check.
So, moving on to a quick overview of the administration building. That, again, our next largest capital improvement program.
So hopefully this will pull some of the thoughts that we've already had all together, because as our chair just mentioned, this is our largest project now that the wastewater treatment facility is for the most part 60% complete. What you have in your packet is, first of all, you just have the site layout as it stands today at Tupon. First, let me introduce two people. We have two consultants with us to answer any of your questions. One, Caitlin Dotson, who is our environmental expert. It's done just about her Dotson and Associates have done almost all of our environmental work, all of our CEQA documents. There's currently working on the amendment for this particular site location. Also on the line is Calvin Forrest from Renewal Clark. He's the architect that's been working with us. Where we are with this project right now is we've been reporting back to the board. We've been going through the CEQA amendment. The CEQA amendment is part of the permitting process, or the change in zoning or conditional use permit process with the city. It is a requirement. So we wanted to get the CEQA amendment in place so we could then go through the city and we go for a conditional use permit. When we first started talking with the city, there wasn't that many issues. Yes, it was an open space. It'd have to be converted from a zoning perspective, but there was really no obstacles. So what you see here in front of you is the building as it's shown now, some solar fields covering canopies and parking and things like that. The operational building, which is north and south, and then the existing well site in the far northeast corner. The next plan is simply just the floor plan showing the offices in the actual admin building, some of the colors that we've chosen. This is more just an update, that just really reminding everyone, some of you may have not seen some of these colors in the past, but this is what has really been the fundamental parts of the design. We're still in the process of trying to put together a schedule for East Valley Water District. I know 3 of the board members have not seen East Valley, and it's very similar to the building that we're constructing, if not exactly the same. The plans and specification that Alvin has been working on, I estimate about 95% complete, pending final comments from the board following the East Valley Water District tour. The reason I'm holding back and doing any further work on the plans is because I really want you to see that boardroom. That boardroom compared to what you saw at Palm Springs Unified will give you an idea of what you're looking for. Palm Springs Unified did some unique things with concrete, with some of the way they put the lighting, some of the way they've used that room and used that space, versus East Valley, who has more of a wood feel, if you will. It's just a different type of feel when you walk in their boardroom. And I wanted to make sure that you had the chance to see both before we start getting your comments. With that being said, the cost estimate is still in $2022. We were talking with Alvin and trying to put together a cost of some of these things. They have not repriced it since we came up with the $28 million in 2022. If we were to update these costs, it would simply be just an increase in CPI, which I didn't feel was pertinent to share because there's going to be possibly other changes when we get to the environmental and the CEQA update. Caitlin, you're here. Would you like to go over the CEQA document, or would you like me to just go through it and ask any questions? If anybody has any questions.
Happy to. You guys like me to stand or am I okay? You're there. Okay. I'm Caitlin. As you know, you guys have probably met Tom, who's my dad. So I've been working with you guys for many, many, many years. Although I believe I presented to the board for the regional wastewater treatment facility for you guys, and we put together the environment for that. So, you know, we've been going through an addendum, just to correct Brian. There are several different ways you can comply with CEQA, regardless of whether this project would be required to go to the city or not. You guys would have to comply with CEQA because of the type of project that it is and the size. So, an addendum is a document that allows you to use a formally adopted environmental impact report. In this case, it was the Water Facilities Master Plan Environmental Impact Report from 2010, in order to sort of slightly modify what that original project was and make the CEQA process a lot less complicated. The document is much shorter. We began writing it and got nearly to the end, but came upon a bit of a snafu, if you will, through the biological resources report process. And primarily not because there's anything of concern on the site, but because of the Coachella Valley multiple species or MSHCP, so multi-species habitat conservation plan. Sorry, it's a mouthful. So I'm going to use MSHCP going forward just for your information. So while our site visit said there's not any species of concern, we did talk with Brian about, you know, possibly not utilizing the space that's closest to the conservation areas, which would be to the east of the project site. If you guys look at it on maybe a different map, you can see. But yeah, basically on the map. But it happens to fall in the overlay for the Jerusalem cricket, which is this little creature you guys have on your presentation. And Brian's team, they met with Desert Hot Springs and the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission to discuss the path moving forward. And this is where the Jerusalem cricket overlay issue came into play. In addition to us working with them on the compliance with the MSHCP. So we're kind of gonna move on to the, I guess it would be the second of the environmental update slide. So this Jerusalem cricket overlay, was created back when the MSHCP was originally looked at in 1996. That sets the baseline for habitat that could be considered habitat where this species would exist. And unfortunately, even though there's no habitat on the site that we can tell, the plan still considers it to be in that environmental baseline. So there's no really getting around and saying, oh, it doesn't exist there anymore, so we don't need. The MSHCP, and this is really complicated, so please feel free to ask me questions. I had to sit with this for about a week to fully really understand it. The MSHCP requires 90 acres of conservation within that's been mapped. Like you can go on the MSHCP website and see where it's mapped. This project falls into that mapped area, or this project site, I should say. To date, of that 90 acres, only 30 has been conserved. And the plan, the MSHCP stipulates that 10 acres of area can be disturbed, only that is cricket habitat. Only 1 acre has been disturbed so far, meaning 9 acres are available for disturbance. But in order for MSWD to develop this site, they would need to purchase or utilize existing, and we'll talk about that a little bit, existing land that's owned by MSWD, the amount of 60 acres worth of habitat. So you can see why this becomes, how this is, you know, you go down the line and it becomes a little bit infeasible. So 60 acres is somewhat available. Lisa and I looked into, I'm sorry, it's my partner. I think she was online, but I told her she didn't really need to be.
I'm still here, Caitlin.
Here, hi, Lisa. Sorry, she's the biologist that actually used to work for the Tom Dodson and Associates. She now works with Jacobs, but she's probably done the bio for you guys for nearly every project that we've done with MSWD. So we looked into what would it look like for MSWD to be able to purchase 60 acres of land. Is that possible? Is it feasible? How would you do it? And essentially the largest area of cricket habitat has a wind farm on it. And that would be very cost prohibitive to purchase because on a per acre basis, it's about $1 to $2 million per acre to purchase the wind farm that's existing. So 60 acres would be quite infeasible. The other issue is that a lot of the cricket habitat is on BLM land. Some of it's already owned by Coachella Valley Conservation. Some of it's tribal land. And then the only other option that I think would work, but again, I don't necessarily condone it. It's up to you guys to decide and up to Brian to sort of brief you on what he's thinking. I'm just the information giver. You would need to, MSWD would need to compile individual parcels to make up that 60 acres of conservation in order to develop the site. I realize this sounds out there, but I'm presenting you with the facts. MSWD does own 24 acres of land at 15th Avenue and Atlantic area that could be considered partial cricket habitat. The issue with that is that the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission would need to come out and verify whether that habitat is pristine in order for it to be considered eligible to go into conservation. So there's a lot of hoops to jump through. The other consideration is that there are a lot of areas outside of the, it's the Morongo Basin Plan area that we're in over here. There's areas on the other side of the freeway in Palm Springs, kind of towards Whitewater River, that are considered eligible cricket habitat that could be conserved. But we were informed by the commission that they've never done that before. So we would have to be going through a whole new process with them, and they said it was somewhat unadvisable. And then, and Brian has probably briefed you that, you know, there have been environmental protests on a lot of projects. So choosing this site as a, with a significant impact would, on this, this, creature, may not be advisable from a legal perspective either. So that's my update. I'm happy to answer questions, and there's a lot of information, and it's also very disappointing information, and it seems probably quite confusing and discouraging, but there are other options. So I'll leave it to Brian to.
Yeah, so when we started talking to the city, there wasn't a problem. When we started talking with even the CVCC, there's some mitigation measures that may have to be required, but I'm not saying it can't happen. And now it's sort of, as we continue to go through this process, it's gotten more and more difficult. And at the comment that they were making, the path of less resistance is to go somewhere else. The reason I'm bringing this to you in this fashion is because this is the budget process, and we're talking about timing of this project and how to move it forward, how to budget for it, possibly financing, things of that nature. So I just wanted to bring all of the issues that we're having on this particular project and why it may be pushed around in the budget, maybe to next year, or at least having a workshop in the next couple of months to start talking about, do we go out and continue to purchase land? That would increase the cost. Do we continue to evaluate other properties that the district have? There's a lot of moving parts to this, at least it's in the last 6 weeks that have come to this point. So I just wanted to be upfront and let you guys know, I thought this would be the appropriate time, is that even though it's in the budget and where we think it's appropriate and where we think it should be, there are some obstacles that will. So, and as Caitlin said, she's here to answer any environmental questions. We do have our architect if there's any questions, but we will be coming back to you and having a workshop to talk specifically about this, because it's becoming somewhat clear to us that this particular parcel is going to have some difficulty, not only in time, but also in cost, when we have to now purchase other property to make this one a valuable piece. And one thing that she did not bring up, which is also driving us nuts, is we thought, well, maybe we can sell this back to the CVCC or somewhere else. But they said, no, that's been disturbed, so it's not a pristine habitat, so we wouldn't want to buy it anyway.
They said that they would evaluate it, to their credit. I don't want to.
Oh, okay.
They said they would evaluate it. And I think, Lisa and I were looking at this and going, I don't see how this project would go forward. It's very difficult. So the process that we're using is an addendum. And now that we've got sort of a significant impact, because we don't know if we can fully mitigate the impact of the species under the plan, we can't move forward with an addendum because an addendum requires no new significant impact. So there's just a lot of hurdles and for your consideration to think about. Yes.
May I ask a question?
Of course.
You said that the CVCC would have to inspect plots of land that maybe we considered turning into conservation to confirm they were pristine. So would that mean that, let's say we have some bad businesses in the community that like to dump trash or remodel construction debris on this empty land? Would that then make it non-pristine and make it a problem? Or do they not consider the dumping and the illegal trash dumping to be something?
We already disturbed.
This is Lisa. Let me help you with that one.
I was gonna say, she'll be all right.
Pristine, maybe not the word. Basically, does it have value for the species? And if it doesn't have immediate value for the species, can it be brought back with a reason, with high effort, low effort, no effort? So when you start saying, oh, there maybe somebody's dumped some trash, or it's not, it doesn't look like nobody's ever touched it, but that would probably not be a real difficult cleanup and sort of take out weeds and promote the vegetation that you want is not so big. Your property has been, for the most part, a lot of it has been graded, and so you've lost that component of the soil. You've lost some of the species that you might otherwise have. So to bring that back, and again, like Caitlin said, they didn't say they wouldn't. It's just that you probably wouldn't get credit you'd want for it. So like if say, for example, if somebody went to go buy that property from you for credits, they might only get 1/4 to 1 credits for that property because of the disturbance and the level of effort it would take to put it into conservation for that species. Whereas if you went and bought another parcel that maybe didn't, or maybe you had another parcel that you wanted to offer up, and it maybe had some trash or a road through it, then the opportunity for enhancement is better. Maybe you get 1/1 or 3/4 to 1. I mean, you're being asked, if you didn't do the math in your head, you're being asked to do like 9 point something to 1 ratio for your habitat on site, which is like 8.53 acres of the actual cricket habitat. So, so that's kind of, and again, that's because in the plan, they have to front load the mitigation. They can't let their 10 acres go and still only have 30 acres of conservation. So there's some proportionate amount that when they let an acre go, they have to have a certain amount of that goal for the rough step numbers to be appropriate. And that's where they were saying that it wouldn't meet the rough step requirements unless you bought 60 acres for your taking out of 8.53. Clear as mud?
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
Studying environmental horticulture, and then over all the different range of species.
Mm-hmm.
How did you come about the final list of that?
This is just protected in the plan. Actually, when we looked at the, and I say we, at Lisa, looked at the Coachella Valley, GIS system, cricket didn't come up as being a problem on this site. And I think that may be an issue with their, something on their back end isn't allowing, this site to show up as needing a check for cricket. But then when Brian and his team had a meeting with the CDCC, they said, oh yeah, by the way, this is in cricket habitat. So you're gonna need X mitigation. And that's where we took the sort of the path of figuring out how does this work? How did they get there? And spoke with them ourselves to make sure that we were understanding. Essentially, for every, like Lisa said, for every acre that you disturb, you have to protect 9 in its place. It's a 1 to 9 range. Now, they decided that many years ago. This is, nothing to do with that.
I'm finding it kind of hard to believe it. If you came and you told me you found a lizard there, or kangaroo rat, or plant there, in fact, this little cricket guy was hardly ever mentioned in any of my classes. So I don't know if we should, maybe think about going and finding another party to take a look to see if it actually exists there.
So it doesn't. That wasn't the determination from
It
the
doesn't
biologist.
exist.
That's the issue, is that I think I mentioned that there's a 1996 baseline. So back in 1996, people from the CDCC went out and they said, let's do surveys of the area and determine what appropriate cricket habitat looks like. So they mapped it in 1996. And the way that this particular plan works is not the way that every MSHCP works, but this particular, the Coachella Valley MSHCP requires that utilizes that 1996 baseline, meaning that in 1996, there was cricket at that site. The fact that there's not cricket there now has no bearing on the fact that you still have to mitigate for that 1996 level. It makes no sense, but it's the way it is.
Yeah, you are correct.
It doesn't make sense. Unfortunately, I wish I had a better,
Well, I think,
but we can't do anything about the plan to change it right now.
You can add insult to, if you want to add insult to injury, for the first part of the plan, Desert Hot Springs wasn't part of the plan, but they'd still been mapped as the overall plan area. And so even though that disturbance to that habitat happened while you were not part of the plan, or DHS wasn't part of the plan, they're still saying that it's an unauthorized disturbance, and therefore they're going to assume the species is present. And I'm not an entomologist, specifically, but I would be willing to bet $1 zillion that if you went and had a study done, you will not find Jerusalem cricket on that site based on the disturbance that's been done. But what the plan is saying is, regardless of what's there today, we're assuming it to be occupied, and you're going to have to mitigate it as occupied habitat. And I know that's, like Caitlin says, that's a raw deal, and you kind of have to sit with it for a while, and go through all the stages of death, of anger, and all that fun stuff. But that's what they're saying, and it would probably cost you a tremendous amount to try to fight that, and you probably would just end up with having to go through a plan amendment instead of this isn't fair lawsuit, which is an option.
Is there any history of the boundaries ever being changed? Or like you said, it's a fight and we'd have to. It'd be
I don't think so. I think I think the plan stipulates that you must use the 1996 levels, so I don't think that you could. We did ask, if we find evidence that it doesn't exist there, can we move forward and say this doesn't, represent habitat? But it only matters when it's sort of an inverse situation, where if Coachella Valley wanted to buy your property, then they might evaluate it and be like, you know what, doesn't look like crickets here, so we don't want to buy this property from you. So unfortunately, it doesn't work out in your favor in either situation very easily.
Even if we got rid of the cricket situation, we still might find other endangered species out.
You could, but Lisa did do a full survey while it was not raining, I think the only thing she found on the site was it milkfetch, Lisa?
The poppy, but it was in the parts of the area of the flood control areas that you weren't going to touch.
Yeah, so the design of the site, if we had not had this cricket issue, would have been fine. There really weren't any issues. You could say you might need a biological monitor, but in all honesty, this project would be subject to a lot of mitigation measures that were originally meant for the water facilities master plan environmental impact report that would have come from that. So you would have been really heavily protected for both cultural and bio resources, meaning you might have had to have a biological monitor out there, even though there's not great pristine habitat. So I think you could argue without that issue that you would have been protected as far as biological resources.
Environmental level, is it your recommendation we find a new place to build?
On an environmental level, I think you would have to call it a significant impact, meaning that you need to spend the money to do an environmental impact report, which would be on the order of maybe $100,000, maybe more, depending upon the number of studies. I mean, I think we did the one for many years, not many, but about 5 years ago for the water treatment facility for like $74,000, but you add inflation, it's probably going to be $100,000 to $150,000.
And then you have to realize that
you're
looking at a situation of an unmitigatable significant impact, and therefore you're much more open to litigation, because you're going to have to do your board would have to do a statement of overriding consideration, say that, there's a significant impact here that we can't mitigate because we don't have the 60 acres or we can't put it together because it's, 57 owners, it's not feasible. But this project is super important, and so we're going to do it anyway, which is why you do an environmental impact report. So when you do that statement of overriding consideration, you're still going to be very open to lawsuits.
Especially by the CVCC, they could potentially sue you for not complying with the plan. Right. I don't know the ins and outs. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not here to give you legal advice. So just be aware of that.
Environmental,
Yeah. And so I think Brian is very much so going to be presenting you guys with other options that sound viable from what I've heard, but I think that's for a different meeting. This is sort of just that these are the hurdles that we're currently going through, and we want to make sure that we're being transparent with you. Yeah.
So what about the relatively new development that would be adjacent, it's already adjacent to the property you want to build? Didn't they do an environmental impact report?
They did, but that's unfortunately for them, it's outside of that cricket habitat. Actually, I'll show you a picture of what
It's right next door.
I just want to show you how funky,
Yeah, you want me, Caitlin, I have it all up on my GIS here if you want me to share my screen, if that's something that.
you see these little squiggly lines right here. That's what the cricket habitat looks like on the plan. So it's not a very straightforward like box. Meaning that your project is in that area, but the project next door is not. So that, and it's all because it's in this sort of squiggly box line. So anywhere you see I think it's the white or I can't remember which color it is. I think it's the pink, or the pinkish red. That's why this is so
So if we
difficult.
see those crickets elsewhere in developed land, how did that get developed if those crickets live there?
Well, it might have been developed.
1996. I don't know, I don't have
It could have been developed
Under the
before.
cricket little micro environment within the.
Yeah, I don't know how they came up with these. They're very strange areas. We were a little bit baffled by the.
Microclimates, huh?
So maybe that kind of goes back to what I said about rather than putting the whole 30 something in here, is cutting that back. Because now we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do, and do we have options? And so you say we're gonna have a meeting, but what are our other options? I mean, I know we own other property. Hopefully not with cricket habitat, but who knows who else lives there?
Robert, here's,
Well-
don't mind me interrupting, I paid $20,000 for this piece of property, I think it was. And then if you wanna fight out or get to another environmental impact, $100,000 or more. We have the blueprints, so the cost to change the foundation on these blueprints to set it somewhere else would probably be around 200,000 or something. So I've been saying, the safest spot.
Well,
So that's all I can say
that's what
about
I'm
this
saying.
point. Yeah.
That's a given.
To give you the.
At this point, that's a given.
Yeah.
And so it's, okay, now we have to have a plan B, so I'm just kind of questioning without getting into too many details. Do we have other viable options location wise in terms of property that we own?
We do have other options and we would like the opportunity to bring that back to the board. I know that 3 of the members of this board did not see the original discussions that we had and how we selected this particular spot. We looked at the corporate yard, we looked at the regional plant facility, we looked at purchasing property. So we have looked at other locations. So what I would like to do is go back to those original presentations and take out some of the more relevant things and bring that back to the board so we can start those discussions.
Okay, so then
You might
would
be able to look at new property that out there, because the market isn't like it was, that might, budget out.
So you would concur then we don't need to have $30,000 budget item?
33 million, I think we can trim that back, but as a placeholder and putting it there, yes, if we were, I'm gonna throw out if we were to move this to the corporate yard and only to build the admin building, we wouldn't spend the 33 million, and that's the path of least resistance, because we already have that property, it's already got blacktop, it's just, there'd be a rehabilitation of that property, so there'd be very little environmental issues that we'd have to address. Even that plan, we wouldn't be able to start construction probably until 6 months. So, and that building is, I believe, $18 million, so we would never get.
Okay, so we could in theory cut that back a little?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Well,
Sorry.
there's a lot of considerations that, that I'm not going to be affected by, but I can tell you that if you're thinking of putting this administrative building in the service center, but you got to think that it's permanent. It's 100 years. Everybody, that building and that facility will be around, and everybody in this room is dead. And so it's not a decision that you make just because it's the cheapest. You
No,
got to think about in the long run, what are all this, and it's not.
And I think that's
something
the
we're gonna do
conversation
today.
for another day.
Yeah.
I think it's good to know this, though, that maybe, it brings my concerns up, so, and I don't want to waste this gentleman's time, so.
We're taking a $15 million loan and want to put it over there where that 30 is. They need to do that.
We can't do that.
No, that's,
Okay,
Brian, do you have
Right.
anything else on this?
anything else we need to do?
Okay.
You have
It was
to.
it was really great to be with you all. I'm sorry to have been the bearer.
Oh, it's all right.
of
You know, don't worry if you're doing your job.
Thank
We
you,
will-
Lisa, if you're still
We
on the
appreciate
line.
you doing your job.
We will,
So to address the one question, the Coachella Valley Jerusalem cricket is a very narrow endemic that occurs only in this, in the sand dunes, the Coachella Valley area. Not the same Jerusalem cricket species that you have in most developed areas or you might find in your backyard, just to kind of share with you that distinction. I'm not sure, only they and some very, very limited experts can tell the difference, however, in my mind, but it is a different species, and that's why it's not the same. If that helps at all.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Could I
all. Have a
request
good rest of your-
not to drag your time out, I apologize. But, just like a 7-minute recess for us to stretch and use the restroom.
we're almost done, aren't you?
Of course.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate it.
Do we have to adjourn the bathroom break or?
5-minute recess. Okay, we're back in session on there. Who's next?
The last part of the presentation is gonna be John with Rough Tellus, who's gonna share with you pretty much the process of what it is, that he's gonna be doing in the next couple of months to look at our finances, to give us some guidance, for the board as to where we go from here. What our strategy should be, especially when it comes to policies, because we do not have, many policies, that trigger a lot of what we do, for funds and availability and, basically the procedures, so.
Okay,
Thank you for having me. I'm based in the Temecula-Murrieta area, and my firm Ractelis does rate studies for wastewater and water utilities all over the country. And we have a pretty large practice out here in Southern California. I thought it might be good just to have an introductory slide which shows what the district asked for in its RFP as they sought a consultant to help them with this long-range financial planning process. And often you'll hear staff refer to this as the financial master plan, which is just another way of referring to it. And so what the district asked for was basically a 10-year projection of your ability to meet your debt service coverage requirements based on your contractually obligated debt service payments. Then I think most importantly, and one that falls under that debt service question, is to build a comprehensive 30-year cash flow model that really tries to take a detailed look at projected revenues as well as projected costs and things like cash reserve. And then, of course, two outcomes of that would be the development of a comprehensive report, which is what this long-range finance plan document is, and then also a Microsoft Excel model, which the district can actually use, as opposed to one that requires the hiring of a PhD in computer science to run for you. So when we think about financial planning, whether it's 5, a 10-year, or even a 30-year plan, we know there are certain outcomes that are going to come out of that process we really want to focus on. One is understanding what our long-term funding needs are, whether that's rates, capacity fees, debt service, or excuse me, debt financing for special assessment debt or revenue bonds, et cetera. We want to identify those needs and sources of financing. And then I think what we really want to focus on for the district is the development of what I would call an optimal capital financing strategy. So theoretically, as we build this financial plan, we're going to be able to say, well, what would happen if we wanted to finance all of this with rate revenue increases? Well, what would happen is you'd have gigantic rate revenue increases. And so there is some combination of external debt, capacity fees, which I don't believe the district has updated for quite a long time, special assessment debt associated with changeover from septic to your wastewater system, property taxes that will meet the board's pleasure, especially as it relates to what's happening with overall rate revenue increases. And of course, all of that's going to be taking place within the context of not only laying out this model, but doing a lot of alternatives. And the two alternatives I think I'd really focus on are alternatives related to your CIP forecast, and then alternatives related to customer demand, both from an account growth perspective and also from the perspective of billed water consumption, billed sewer discharges. Two sort of corollary fallouts of the financial planning process are, number one, we are going to figure out how much rate revenue you need. And this gets to the whole issue of how much do you need to raise rates every year. And that's what we might term the revenue requirement from rates. And then the financial planning process does lay the foundation for actually doing a follow-on cost of service study. I thought it might be useful to just show the financial planning process and kind of where it fits in the overall notion of doing a rate study to set Proposition 218 rates. I'm only going to focus really just on the two boxes on the lower left, and I've labeled one of those boxes the quote rate study framework. Another term for that might be understanding the operational context of the utility in question, in this case, the district. understanding what's going on with the district in terms of things like your service territory demographics, what type of customers you have, how fast you're growing, what their water consumption characteristics are, your CIP needs, what financial policies you have in place, or in some cases you don't have in place that need to be developed, understanding any specific regulatory requirements that you may have, and long-term concerns about your water supply portfolio, that sort of thing. We did have what I hope, I'm not sure if Brian would agree with this, but hopefully Arturo would. Hopefully we had a really good meeting on this last week where we really dove into the district sort of from this level of key risks and opportunities that you have to get us started. Once we know all that, well, we'll start building a financial plan. And from one perspective, it's a rote process. It's building an Excel model and filling in inputs for things like demand and cost and forecasting revenue. But I think that what's really a good opportunity here for the district right now is this master planning process on the financial side is taking place as you're finishing up your water and sewer engineering master plans. We're going to have fresh inputs for CIP expenditures. And those CIP expenditures, based on what I've just heard today, are going to be overseen by the board, and you'll be looking at the priorities associated with those expenditures. And then to the extent I understand what you are going to be doing from a strategic planning process, this financial plan will dovetail with the board's strategic plan. So as you, for example, make determinations regarding the focus you'd like to put on long-term water use efficiency and conservation by your customers, and what that means in terms of possible expenditures to fund that, and what implications it has for your capital improvement program. Or as you ponder the prioritization of an administration building versus other, perhaps more important actual physical infrastructure, that will be reflected, those decisions will be presumably reflected in the CIP plan, and then certainly those will be reflected in the financial plan that my firm will be developing for you. So there's kind of a nice synchronicity there. Really, and I promise this is my last slide. I know you can hear really well. I don't know how helpful this is, but this financial planning process, especially a really long-term, long-range 30-year plan like we're going to be developing, it is, number one, an iterative process. But number two, it's a process that incorporates inputs from all of the staff across, key functional areas within the district. So obviously, it involves engineering and operations. It also involves customer service and finance. It may involve inputs from whoever's running your conservation program. It clearly involves inputs from the executive team as well as the board. And so that financial planning process is a way to sort of really go hand in hand with strategic planning, to get everybody involved and set the course. It's a good thing for all utilities. Next off, what this little pinwheel is designed to just show you are some of the steps. And I want to emphasize these are all interrelated steps. Understanding your operating context, sort of in the upper right pie slice, really diving into financial policies. Now, I have to admit to you, the financial policies that I think that my firm was really visualizing, helping you with, are financial policies related to things like what sort of cash reserves should you be carrying in order to have an adequate amount, for example, of operating reserves to perhaps help you withstand a drought curtailment situation or a cool, wet summer to the extent you have cool, wet summers out here. What sort of cash reserves might you be carrying for emergency issues related to equipment failures or your billing system going down? What sort of long-term reserves might you want to begin to be building up for repair and replacement capital? So I think my firm really visualized assisting the district from that perspective. Then I think there are also some really interesting questions related to how do you want to use debt? Do you ever want to use debt to finance repair and replacement capital, or you all want that to be rate funding? That could be the question. To the extent that you have requirements to meet a minimum debt service coverage of less than 1.2, just as an example, what's an appropriate planning standard for Arturo to work around to have some safety there. Is it 1.5? Is it 1.75? So I heard some discussion here today about your current procurement policies or maybe policies related to what the board sees. Yeah, my firm can definitely help with that because we do a lot of that work. I'm not necessarily sure I would quite prefer to do that in this process, but if you want to help on that, I'm sure we can work something out. After financial policies, I really want to emphasize demand forecasting because ultimately a financial plan, however long-term it is not relevant if it doesn't have reasonable forecasting. We want to understand your customer demographics, which I learned last week, it's almost 90% residential. What your potential growth rates are, how per capita per day consumption, or let's say monthly, average monthly consumption per account has changed historically and how we think it may change going forward so that we can come up with a reasonable forecast of demand and then associated revenues. Then at the bottom of the pie slice is this funding gap analysis. So this is the notion of what amount of revenue are you going to earn from your existing rates if you have no rate increases? And what are your costs going to be? And how big is that funding gap that we need to fill? And as we move sort of on the upward from the funding gap analysis, here we get to the notion of the optimal capital financing strategy. This is a lot of scenario analysis that we'll be working with Arturo, and I'm sure other members of the executive team and through the board will see various scenarios depending on how the executive team wants to be presenting it to you regarding the use of rate increases versus debt, for example. And then finally, I'll just go to the top pie chart in the upper left that says scenario analysis. I'm emphasizing scenario analysis a lot because there'll be scenarios related to demand, scenarios related to CIP, scenarios related to inflation escalation factors for your O&M costs. And I think I've pretty much exhausted my presentation, but it is a nice dovetail with your engineering master plans and the board's strategic planning work.
Any questions?
You said you'd be able to assist us with some extra. Are you including in that looking at our expenditures for wages, salaries, fringe benefits, and compare the percentage of our total revenue? Are you going to be helping us determine whether we're on a too steep of an incline on that, or whether we need to draw that back a little bit? Are you going to be able to provide us community comparison with your client background and expertise in the area that would help us see if we're where we should be?
Yeah, I think there's two things that immediately come to mind that we can be useful at. One is to understand through a benchmarking study how Mission Springs compares to similar utilities, whether that be similar utilities in this part of Southern California or utilities of a similar size and structure throughout the Western US, in terms of what expenditures are for things like salaries and benefits as a part of your overall operating budget. So that's one thing that can be done. The other thing that can be done is that you have not hired my firm to do an audit. So we are not going to jump in and audit underlying documentation associated with particular O&M expense. But what we can do is we can ask questions like, Arturo, why was the expenditure for pumping X and now it's budgeted at Y? What's the explanation for why it went up so much? And so it's not really a detailed auditing process as much as it is just a sniff test for reasonableness, because ultimately you're responsible for your expenditure budgets. All we can really do is a third party is look at them and make some value judgments and ask some questions.
And as far as the financial policy portion, it looks like some of what I might be including in that might be a little different in what you were originally including. But am I understanding correctly that looking at our board to executive financial policies would be something you would be able to?
I think my firm can do that. I think we do a lot of management consulting in areas like that. My consulting expertise. It's more as it relates to cash reserves and the use of leverage, i.e. debt in the capital structure, for example. But if that was something that the district had an interest in, what I would seek to do is put the district in touch with experts on my staff and to kind of understand whether we can help you. I'm sure we can, and frankly, what that consulting fee would be from our perspective.
Thank you.
So at this point, I'm opening up for any final questions before we adjourn. And any other details that you would want to get, I can certainly provide those to you via email. Or if you want to have a meeting here at the district.
While you're thinking,
Fiscal year, so we don't run next year's board budget.
you know, we have a lot of things that are coming together, which is really important, and you know, well, some of it by coincidence. We haven't had the plan with water and sewer, you know, being finished. We have a financial master plan that we're doing. We have really the two major projects that we're probably facing on out there. We talked about the strategic plan, so we get some bids in to facilitate around that. We've done the class comp, which answers a little bit of how are we competing with the other agencies in the valley. So this is a good time to have this process. You're here to where you can really have a lot of influence.
And I do have a couple more things, and I'm really sorry to add it right now, but just quickly, on page 124, when we're talking about the functionals. Sorry, you don't have to open it. You don't have to open it. It's quick. When I add together the salary, wages, employee benefits, and fringe benefits, I get $8.6 million as our estimated 2024 budget. When I was doing just some preliminary research, the industry recommended business standard practices is to not exceed 20 to 30% of your gross revenue. At 25%, we would only be at 6.6. I'm concerned that in our attempt to please our employees, we may be over extending ourselves within our budget. And I just would like some further consideration as to these increases and where we fall in that percentage. And I'd like some more information on that aspect. And then the only other thing I had was the strategic performance and accomplishments, and I'm not going to go into them again, but starting on page 76 and ending on page 82, they are 100% word for word identical to what was there the year before. And I'm pretty sure they were the same before that, and before that, and before that. And so, like, one example in here was communicating strategic plan to the employees. I would assume that got done in 2017. So for that to be on here as a priority doesn't make sense to me. I would really like to see this updated as to what we've done, what remains an actual project for each, because these are done by department, it appears, each department strategic goal, and it's by A through C as far as their priorities. And like I said, there's no change. So I would really like to see what was done, what wasn't done, what needs to be done. And that would give me a better idea of some of these strategic plan accomplishments that you're trying to tell me were accomplished, because it was the same. So that was it. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Regarding the percentage of, when we did the board comp, did we get information as far as like what percentage these other agencies of their total revenue they were spending? I know we really looked at position versus position, but
Right.
did it include like an overall?
Not comparing it to revenue, because we're never gonna be able to match someone like MSWD, but we can match their salaries to keep that employee working here versus going there. That's what we focused on.
Right.
And
It's a
comparing
different issue.
comparing it to all the other agencies around the area, that's where we were trying to.
I mean, if we comply in one area, we're gonna probably fall down in another area. mean, one thing is keeping good employees. So,
Which I agree completely with that being a strong premises, but at the same time, like, I don't know who I mentioned it to, but in reviewing our recent vote, for the COLA and the, Spanish speaking edition, we had just prior to that voted, to approve a vacation policy where the vacation hours would be able to count toward overtime. Well, a year and a half before that, we had said that overtime and compensation pay can be turned into vacation. So I would like us to look at things like that and be able to assert to the board and to the public that our compensation time isn't then creating more paid time off, and that we are tracking that our employees are earning all of those and not earning additional benefits on a benefit. Does that make
Actually,
sense?
I think there's no vacation. We didn't change anything around vacation. It was
Well,
about compensation.
you will-
It's called comp time. So when people work overtime, they can either take the pay for that overtime, or they can convert it into compensation time that will match one to
we don't
one what
increase
they've
the vacation.
already earned. So there's no additional benefit. It's just the way that they can hold on to get additional let's call it vacation, because then they can then
Right.
say, okay, I don't have to work an hour and a half because I've got it in.
Technically, it should be a 0.
However, I could see it that you are on vacation, you have a 7-day vacation days, and then you have 3 days of comp pay, and that you came back to work on a Friday and you came to work Saturday, and now you've accumulated overtime because you were on vacation Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
What she's talking about.
It
Oh,
concerns me
So you're talking, okay, so that's, you're talking about
about the
how we calculate overtime.
overtime based on
Ah.
compensation pay. Because if it turns into vacation time and their vacation time can count toward more overtime, then they are getting additional
No,
benefits
no.
on the
What,
benefit.
what we actually did is we fixed that loophole so that wouldn't occur. They can only, it hadn't happened, but we realized that there was a loophole where people could play that. Therefore, we require now that, and one of the parts of the change in that policy is that they have to ask for vacation 2 weeks in advance, so they can't do exactly what you explained.
No, but according to that policy, if they do that vacation, they request it 2 weeks in advance, then when they come back, they can work they could have days, say I take a vacation day, and then I work 5 days, I get overtime for that 5th day, and legally, overtime is for hours worked, not hours paid.
Correct.
But that was changed, so that loophole does exist for people who requested vacation or vacation day more than 2 weeks in advance.
It's just, I think because we've made so many changes every year at the employee's request, which I think is a great policy that we have to have them be able to tell us what they want. At the same time, I don't feel that we're doing enough look at the previous year's changes and how the new changes will affect those. And I think I would like a little more information on those in the future.
I think that's very good comment.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Oh,
One more. Regarding the long-term financial plan, does it make sense for us to be doing our strategic plan simultaneously? Or do you feel like doing one before the other would benefit us more, or?
I think in a perfect world, you would do a strategic plan even before you did an engineering master. Make it perfect. Because depending on the type of utility, the board's strategic plan may actually drive a lot of long-term CFP. I think here for the district, with these processes going forward concurrently, just out of necessity, I think we need to do it this way with them going forward concurrently. I think you need to have a financial planning document so that you can make a determination on frankly what you need to do in terms of potential rate increases and what you may feel is appropriate to do in terms of doing capacity fee study and updating these capacity fees. So in a perfect world, I think the strategic plan comes first. Generally, you don't see too many utilities that are in that perfect situation where they've got a great linearity. And so a lot of times processes do run along concurrently.
And your different clients that you have, do you feel like they have a pretty set schedule of when they're doing these strategic plans, financial plans? Is it almost like a policy of every 8 years we're doing this, or is it kind of a reactive, oops, we should have done this 5 years ago?
It's really all over the board. So let's say there are sophisticated, I'll just use a term, sophisticated tier one utilities. These are really large utilities in urban settings that have extensive staff. They may actually have a protocol where they do a strategic plan every 4 or 5 years. And they update their engineering master plans on a set schedule. And they also adopt rates that are Proposition 218 every 4 to 5 years. And things do really run like clockwork in some agencies. But as you get into smaller utilities, it's all over the board. I would say there are some utilities, if you ask the board member whether they've done a strategic plan, they might not be sure whether they really have. They've certainly made strategic decisions, but whether it was in the outcome of a overall process is open to question.
Let me clarify a quick point. The strategic plan, we can do in about 3 or 4 days and have the report done in 4 to 6 weeks. The long range financial plan is something that's just started, and it's going to take us 6 weeks or 6 months potentially to get all the policies in place and start looking at the CIPs and then doing financing and zeros and things like that. So we can actually get there to what the with. Same thing with the long range plan, or the master plan as well. We're still doing the modeling, then we have to create the projects, and then we have to prioritize them. But again, that's 3 or 4 months down the road, or 2 months down the road at the very least. We can do a strategic plan a long time less than that, so we can still have the strategic plan done before those other 2 documents, so that those thoughts can be included in both the master plan and the long range.
Great.
I have one quick question, Mr. Martin.
Okay,
May say your general manager, Mr. Wallem, would like to answer it later, that's fine. We have an extra $300,000 for the Horton plant budget, and another approximately, and then another 500,000 for operating costs on the Nancy Wright. We're gonna be hooking up approximately 405 sewer hookups, or are those all sewer hookups, or part of that 405 vacant lots that will be hooked up later? What I'm getting at is, we're looking at $800,000 and have to come up with every year for that additional, but we're not hooking up enough residents to the plant. When we get down there at the Nancy Wright plant, everything's kind of far away, and we're looking at around 3 million or more per mile for the sewer line, and we need another like 60 miles of sewer line to get everybody hooked up. So when we get to the point of the Nancy Wright treatment plant being connected with the Horton plant, where are we going to get that additional revenue of 800,000? And how are we going to get the rest of the folks hooked up from there, from the Nancy Wright treatment plant? That'll be my question. You can answer that now or later. Or...
Well, I didn't follow your
You
point.
didn't follow that, okay.
The $8,000 is part of operating revenue that
But you
Takes the
the cost to operate the plant, so that's already in the budget.
okay, so that's already in the budget.
That's there, money's there.
Money's there in the budget.
Now, the septic sewer project will be funded separately through assessment
Right.
districts and grants.
So then looking,
Separate, and that won't come out of these.
right, so next year, we have to continue to get that money from somewhere.
Well, we
So-
won't do the project if we don't get the money. It's
My point in time.
okay.
So if you only have 400 homes you're hooking up, or however many lots it is, okay, you only have so much at $50 a hookup coming in. Now, the Nancy Wright treatment plant, if you're gonna hook up any more residents to that, we have to come up with how many millions line to get them hooked up. So how long are we
Those
going
are
to operate?
subsidy districts.
Yeah, that comes from
Yes,
another
that-
source.
So we're gonna keep filing for that down the road?
Sure,
Hopefully
Yeah,
get
that's the
it.
policy we've had
Yeah,
for
if it
20
doesn't
years.
come in,
Doesn't come in, we don't build it. Right now, the flows are there, we can operate both plants. Right now,
operate, but yeah.
Oh,
Well, remember, we were required to build extra capacity because we were exceeding at the port.
I understand
So,
how we got, I understand why we got the treatment, I said we didn't need it, but now that we got it, how do we support it?
By the operating fees that we collect through general revenues.
Yeah.
That's already in the budget and it will continue to be there.
Yeah.
I believe right now we have positive cash flow in both the water and the sewer state.
Right, and then our financial net, plan, we're gonna lay it out, is how to best. All right. Move forward with that.
I don't think we answered your question, but I'm not sure exactly.
No, I think, it's kind of one of those questions that stuck today, but in the future, how do we get to the point of getting everybody hooked up in our financial? I think this gentleman here, he's thinking about what's being said,
Well,
so we'll just wait for him
we
to get
can't
that
use
part
rate,
figured
we
out.
can't use rate money to hook them up.
Can't use rate money to hook them up, okay, so then we have to rely on grants to get them hooked up.
And
And until we get the grant to get them hooked up, we're operating at,
not necessarily, at a loss, we're gonna set the rate so that.
so the other people paying the rates will pay for that extra 800.
No, I don't think so. I'm not exactly sure.
We have extra capacity, but that's required by the regional board.
Every district.
And that
I
cost.
understand all that. What I don't understand is how we gonna keep coming up with this $800,000? Because once we get to the point where we're at, now next year, we still have to come up with another 800, but how are we getting them hooked up? What if we don't get that?
We
How
do,
far, how many miles do we need to get from the Nancy Wright treatment plant to the next neighborhood where we will hook up? Like I said, you could answer this question later at the study.
Okay, hold on a second. Amber?
oh, I was just gonna make the comment that we have, just as a reminder, we have Skyborn that's very close. And we'll definitely heading, I'm sure, their sewer will be going to the new plant. Because they're closer to that, correct?
No,
They'll still be going to Horton?
well, once we get it to Horton, because right now, everything we serve goes to Horton.
Well, my point was, they're only on the completion of their second phase and they have 4 more phases with like 800 more residential homes.
Actually have 10 phases.
10 phases.
So they go to
So
2,000.
we used to be bringing, 2,000, 2,500 homes. Those will all be hooked to sewer within the next 5 years. Their plan.
We'll see what the market does.
Correct.
If it's great and everything.
Correct. But
What's in the
supposedly,
Things place currently taken from 4 to 5 places.
okay,
And that,
we'll still be collecting sewer.
Yeah, we got it, and then we can transfer the these plans. We thought that all through, but. You know.
I think I know what she's asking. I want to confirm them.
Anyway, I was just trying to help.
Yeah, it's a kind of a tricky question, but I think you get after it and have the study session to be okay.
Okay, with that, first of all, I want to thank staff for the presentation, Arturo and Ryan, our guest consultants that spoke. Provided, did a lot of work on this project. Thank you very much. It was a very informative, albeit tough topic to cram into 2 hours and stuff, so but I think it was well worth the time spent. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And we're adjourned.